Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Sarada falls in love with Naruto, part 1. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. Fair warning, there's maybe some lemons. Heartbeat. Sarada felt a burning on her cheeks, and a thudding in her chest. She was going to walk with the Hokage today to discuss her father. Her mom had put this off for a while, but now that Sarada was older, and able to understand the world a little bit more, Sarada insisted, and insisted over and over again for her mom to just tell her. But Sakura did not want her daughter to be brought into the light about everything her father had done in his life. Sakura left things to Naruto to explain that Sakura, herself, didn't quite get. Sarada paced in front of the Uzumaki house. She was told to report there at 5 p.m. sharp. She wondered what on earth the Hokage could tell her that she didn't already figure out herself, or was told by her mom. Sarada. Hinata called from the front door. Come in. He is always running late, isn't he? She blushed at her words. Addressing the Hokage like that. I don't want to intrude, Lady Hinata. Sarada could not deny that she longed to step into that home, but she also knew her place. No worries. Himawari and Boruto are out, and I just hate for you to stand out there waiting on the Hokage. Hinata waved for Sarada to come up the steps. Sarada followed the gesture and walked up the steps. She found herself in the doorway, and Hinata had already disappeared into the other room. Sarada looked around curiously. I am just cleaning up the kitchen. Please make yourself at home. He should be finishing up soon in the back. I told him that you were here already. Hinata's voice carried through the beautiful home. She breathed in deeply, and could smell the faint ramen remnants. She smiled thinking about how much the Hokage loved ramen. She glanced at the hut by the door where Naruto hung his Hokage cloak and hat. She smiled thinking about how handsome he looked wearing that cloak. The warmth on her cheeks returned. She looked around to try, and took her mind off her thoughts of him. She walked slowly in the home, taking every sight and detail in. She never would have thought she would find herself in the Uzumaki home. Sarada. The Hokage's voice filled her ears. Ready? Oh yeah. She said automatically. Okay. Let's go. Naruto turned to the kitchen, and beckoned his wife over. We will get going. If you hear from Sakura, just tell her we will be back before it's too late. He licked his bottom lip, eager for his wife to kiss him. Hinata smiled, embarrassed by his behavior. Oh Hinata. He chuckled. Sarada gulped down the dryness in her throat. She had realized her eyes were fixed on Naruto, and, as soon as he licked his bottom lip, she almost let out a noise from her throat. She always found Naruto attractive in a grown man, mentor, teacher kind of way, but today she was catching herself being awkward about it, and even a little more lustful. She turned her head quickly, and just tried to focus on another part of the room. For the next minute or so, all Sarada could imagine was Naruto's tongue touching his bottom lip, practically begging for his wife to kiss him. Sarada shifted on her feet, and tried not to think about it, but his blonde hair and whiskered cheeks filled her mind. Okay. Okay. He playfully smiled. No kiss, at least hug me. He held his arms open, and Hinata hugged him, but Naruto shifted his body, so all Sarada could see was his back. She found her eyes looking over him again. She loved how he looked fit, but not too much muscle. She found her mind drifting again. She bit her lip, and forced herself to start walking towards the door, and wait patiently for the Hokage. She hoped her cheeks didn't give away the way she was feeling. And Sarada feels free to put him in his place if he needs it. Hinata sounded stern, but she had a smile on her face, as well. Hinata knew the kind of guy Naruto was. Yes, Lady Hinata. Sarada spoke respectfully. She felt a tingle in her spine, as she thought about putting Naruto in his place. Those words were quickly taken out of context in her mind. The Hokage and Sarada started walking, and most of the walk felt awkward to both of them. Naruto was not quite sure what to talk about. He usually left diplomacy and stuff to everyone else. He never wanted Sarada, Sasuke, or Sakura to feel disconnected from him though. He placed both hands behind his head and walked casually. He decided to wear his Hokage cloak, but leave the hat at home. That hat seemed silly to him anyways. Everyone in the Leaf Village knew who he was. He wanted to make Sarada feel like she got answers she wanted or needed about her dad. He knew what it was like to not have a dad. He glanced at her as they walked. Sarada had a slightly quicker pace than him, and he took advantage of that to take in just how grown up she was now. He smiled at the thought of his two best friends residing in this young lady. She looked so grown up now, and Naruto caught himself looking over the curves of her body. He couldn't help but notice the curve of her back, and the way her hips moved so perfectly, as she took her quick-paced steps. Sarada wasn't sure where exactly they were going, but continued on the road. She figured if there was any change in direction, he would let her know. She could feel his gaze on her. She wondered if he was checking her out or just checking on her. She slowly turned her eyes to him, and her dark eyes met his brilliant blue eyes, and they both blushed deep red. Sarada looked straight ahead now. Does that mean he was checking me out? What does this mean? Wait. It's just a guy thing, right? Mom says the guys can't help it sometimes. Oh, great, now I am thinking about my mom's lectures. Oh, let's go this way. Naruto smiled and pointed to the right. There was a small street that led off to a building of old living quarters. Sure. Sarada didn't question him. She just followed. I know how lonely you must feel sometimes, Sarada. Naruto led her up some steps and into a living space. You know, I never had my parents growing up, and the hardest things in life I had to learn on my own without the guidance of a father, and the only times I ever saw my parents, it wasn't really them. Naruto pointed to a couch and nodded. This is Shikamaru's, and my space away from the office. Sometimes it's too much to be stuck in that office. There's no one that knows about this place except him, and you now. He shut the door behind her once she entered the living space. And me. She had been listening to everything he said, but it all sort of faded away when she found herself in a little hideout of the Hokages all alone with her. Well, yes. He grinned. Sit down. Don't be rude. He gestured to the couch again. I want you to have a safe place to come to if you ever need to talk or just get away. Huh? Sarada slowly sat down and adjusted her glasses that slipped down her nose slightly. Sarada. Life is hard, and I know the kind of person your mom is. I thought I loved her for a long time. He sat down next to Sarada, and his hands rested on her shoulders, and he smiled brightly. And Sasuke, well, your dad just needed more of his own dad, I'm sure. Your family is broken, and if there's anyone in this village that understands broken families, it is me. But Sarada was still lost. She was swimming in confusion, but also staring in his big blue eyes. He was touching her, and they were alone, and no one knew where they were. Naruto smirked and removed his hands. Well then. You are at an age now where you can understand things better, and have grown up enough to make choices of your own. You can make your own opinions, and piece together what you already know or think you know with what you don't know. You are rather smart like your mom and dad. Naruto's eyes gazed up at the ceiling, and he leaned back on the couch with his hands behind his head. Thanks, Hokage. Sarada spoke quietly. She wondered why Naruto was going out of his way for her. She knew he had been without his parents, and that many people shunned him, and refused to even talk to him about his family. She looked at him, stretched his body out, and closed his eyes. She had never seen him so relaxed. Was this like a test or technique he was using to catch her off guard? Sarada stared at his face, feeling confused. Naruto sighed. 16, you know, it feels like so long ago for me, and yet it feels like just yesterday. My mom told me you didn't become Jen until you were 17. Sarada still stared at his face. Her eyes gazed at his whiskers, then moved to his lips. She felt a burning in her tummy, imagining him licking his lip at her the same way he did earlier in the day to his wife. Oh damn, Sarada, what are you thinking? Oh, Sakura. He chuckled. Well, you do know I saved the village a lot. He said in a beat that sort of tone. Sarada let out a small laugh. Of course, I knew that. Uzumaki, Naruto, Legend of the Hidden Leaf, and our 7 Hokage. Damn right, Sarada. He said proudly. Sarada, I want you to know you can always come to me if you have any questions about your dad, or if you need to talk about anything. He opened one eye and peeked at her. She blushed brightly because she was still looking at him. Sarada smiled, looking down at her lap. This must be where Naruto goes to get away from everything, his safe place to think about life and everything. Before she really had time to register what happened next, she found Naruto's arms wrapped around her, and her ear pressed against his chest. She almost let out a longing sigh, but held it in tightly. She had never really had a male figure in her life to talk to, or even get close to, and now she has not just the Hokage, but Naruto Uzumaki. Her heart pounded in her chest, as she felt his heartbeat in her ear. Sarada gulped, hoping that Naruto wouldn't realize she was infatuated with him. She inhaled deeply, as the scent of Naruto filled her senses. Sarada felt as though she could live in this moment forever. She would never forget this feeling. As he released the hug, he smiled at her, and stood up. Well then. If you want, we can call it a day, or we can stay and talk. What do you think? Sarada's mind seemed to drown in the idea of Naruto Uzumaki, even taking a moment out of his day to speak with her. Sarada spent weeks and weeks thinking of a reason to go to him for advice, guidance, or any reason outside needing a mission. She paced in her room. She could not help but think of the way he relaxed in front of her. She sighed and sat on her bed. As she closed her eyes and bit her lip, the sight of the Hokage stretched out next to her filled her mind. Her senses tingled with his presence. She could remember the smell of his cloak and the warmth of his body. She groaned impatiently at herself. What on earth was she going to do about these feelings? No one in the village would understand. She could never go to her mom with advice. She tapped her fingers impatiently on her lap and let out another sigh and stood up. She found herself acting so silly over something that she felt was not worth the fuss. Everything seems normal enough. Girls get infatuated with teachers and their senseis all the time. How could this be any different? Sarada stood up and adjusted her glasses. Everything was normal as could be. It had been a solid 2 months since she had been alone with Naruto, and everything was fine. Sarada left her home and went to meet Konohamaru down at their usual meeting place. As she stepped lightly on her feet, she looked towards the living quarters that many shinobis and students used when they had no homes to live in. She wondered if Naruto was there now, and if he might be alone or was he having a moment out of the office with Shikamaru. Sarada turned her eyes to the road before her, and she tried not to think about the way Naruto licked his lip when attempting to get his wife to kiss him goodbye. Another week went by, and Sarada still found herself longing to be in the presence of the Hokage, and to smell his cloak once again. She stood outside the Hokage's building, and looked in thought. She was thinking how silly she was acting. Her mom had sent her to deliver a scroll for the medical corporation. Sarada wanted to deliver it, but now she felt doubtful that she could do it without making a fool of herself. Sarada finally packed up the nerve, and entered the building. For late afternoon it seemed kind of quiet inside. She always expected everyone to be rushing around trying to get last-minute things done before they left for the day. She knew the 7th was always busy, and often resorted to sending shadow clones home in his absence. This she knew because Boruto complained all too often that his old man was a bad father. Sarada could understand the frustration, but at least Boruto had a father in the village. Who knows where her father is, and if he is okay. Stopping at the famous office door of the Hokage's, Sarada told herself to keep it together. No blushing by now people had to have noticed, especially Hokage himself. Sarada lifted her hand to knock, but right as she did the door opened, and she almost knocked on Shikamaru's face. So sorry, she quickly lowered her hand, and smiled nervously at the shadow ninja. Oh? We were not expecting to see you. Shikamaru glanced over at Naruto, who was standing with his forehead pressed against the window, and eyes staring widely at the view of the Leaf Village. It is a scroll from my mom. It should only take a moment of the Hokage's time. Sarada didn't look too long at Naruto, but rather focused on Shikamaru. Moms can be troublesome, and wait till the last minute to do things. Shikamaru nodded, and jabbed his thumb in the air toward Naruto. He's just about done for the day. Don't keep him too long. I have promised to meet Ino and Choji for our weekly barbecue. Yeah, okay. Sarada nodded, and let Shikamaru pass by. Sarada walked to the office, and heard the click of the door closing, and assumed that it was Shikamaru closing the door. Sir? She politely stood at the desk trying not to overthink what he could possibly be doing with his head against the window pane. My mom wanted me to leave you this scroll. She said it's not urgent, but she didn't want to put it off, and forget all about it. Yeah. She felt uneasy. Sarada. Naruto removed his forehead from the window pane, and turned his back from her. Yes. Okay. She found herself without words. Is that all? He turned to her with a crooked smile. Sarada was fighting for words. She didn't want to leave, but she couldn't think of any reason to say, well, any appropriate reason to stay. Naruto bowed his head. I understand. He walked to his chair, and sat down. It seems I misjudged you. What? Sarada looked lost. Well, you see, I thought for sure by now you might have needed the guidance of a male adult in your life. I thought you would really take me up on the offer of confiding in me about internal struggles you might be having involving Sasuke, your dad. Naruto gave her a serious look. Sarada did not know what to say, because once again she found herself lost in his bright blue eyes, and she could feel her cheeks get warm. It isn't that Sarada began, but lost her words. How could she have lost her words? She has always seemed to know what to say, and when to say it. Strong like Sakura. Naruto smiled at her, and leaned in his chair a little. I do wish to be alone with you. I mean, well, that is, I want to talk to you about stuff. It's just I don't know how, or when, or what to do. She hoped Naruto wouldn't have heard the first part of that. Sarada. Naruto stood up. Whenever you need me, all you have to do is let me know. Need me? Did he really just say need me? Tell you what. I will keep your missions clear for this week. Tomorrow, meet me where I showed you this time. I do have to be getting home though, so I hope you don't mind. Lady Hinata promised pork ramen if I made it home on time. Naruto grinned. Ramen? Yes, for ramen he would do anything. The word itself made him smile. Sarada nodded, and waved bye to him. Ramen, she said, leaving the office. Next day. The next day seemed to drag on, and on. Sarada found anxiousness again edging up from her stomach. She felt like she really could be sick. 2 p.m. came along, and once again she found herself arguing with Boruto. She really wondered if her mom was right in saying Boruto is just like his dad. I mean, really, how true that can be, especially when Boruto likes hamburgers, and cannot stand ramen. Sarada raised her fist to Boruto's head, and brought it down with so much force that Boruto fell to the ground groaning. You really don't learn a thing, do you? She ran off, and found herself standing by the Yamanaka flower shop. She peered in, and saw Ino, and Sai. Sai was poking a big brightly colored flower, and had a look of thought on his face. She stared to see what was going on. This should do. Sai smiled respectfully at Ino, and bowed his head. Oh, Sai. Another painting challenge for Inogen. She lifted his chin with her hand, and smiled. Hasn't Inogen proven worth to you thus far? You misunderstand. This is not what it seems. This will determine who cleans up tonight, and you, my sweet flower, shall be the judge. Sai made a smile, and closed his eyes, delighted in the thought of Inogen, and himself not fighting about talents anymore. You really would do that? She planted a kiss on his forehead. Sarada glanced away at some of the flowers on a shelf nearby. She felt a little twinge of pain in her heart. She thought about what kinds of things her and her dad could have done together around the house. Would she be more willing to help her mom if her dad was around to make it fun? Would both her and her dad ignore her mom's pleas to clean the dishes or shake out the rugs? Oh, how she hated shaking out rugs. Sarada picked up a little flower pot that had a small orange flower barely starting to bloom. She smiled. Something about that flower seemed to stand out in her mind. Oh, Sarada. Ino smiled and waved. Sarada looked away from the flower to look at Ino, looking for something in particular. Ino spoke to Sarada as she turned to the flowers she had just brought into the shop. They needed a little grooming to prepare them to be placed in vases. Well, no. I was just looking. I actually have to go. Sarada waved to Ino, and Ino waved back with a cheerful goodbye, and came back anytime. Sarada walked past the market shop on her way to her rendezvous. She had thought about her dad some more. She wondered if he was the kind of dad that would be a workaholic, or the kind of dad that would put value in the time he spends with his family. She had the idea that her dad was to himself, not because anyone mistreated him or anything, but because it was his personal choice. He had a lot of things in his life he was determined to achieve, and he wasn't going to let anything distract him from his goal. Sarada. A pleasant and welcoming voice snuck up behind her. She was walking up the steps to the meeting place, and Naruto had been at her feet. Perfect timing, yes. Perfect, of course, Sarada smiled. She reached the door, and turned to look at Naruto. I would say from the look on your face you've been thinking about something. Naruto opened the door, and let Sarada enter first. He quickly shut the door, and tapped the door hastily to lock it. Sarada noted that the door was locked now. She wasn't sure why it needed to be locked if no one else knew about it except Shikamaru, and if all they were doing was talking. Sarada awkwardly stood waiting for Naruto to tell her it was okay to sit down. Rather than telling her to sit down, he instead swooped into the small kitchen area, and started looking for something to snack on. Sarada looked around with discomfort in her stomach. So Naruto spoke to her. What is on your mind, Sarada? Sarada did not say anything, but instead walked to the kitchen area, and watched Naruto poke his head in the cabinets above the counter. She could hear his hands pushing things around looking for something. She wondered how she would begin to explain herself to him. It wasn't that she was a shy or nervous person, but the man in the room just feet away from her was the leader of the Hidden Leaf Village. He is a man that's many years older than herself. This paired with the fact he is married and has a family. She groaned in her mind and made a face of discomfort. She was at the point now that she couldn't even bear to be around him without her mind going insane with desire and lustful thoughts. Oh, Naruto groaned in disappointment. He shut the cabinet door. He had intended on making some instant noodles, but there were none left. He started to walk to the living area, but as he stepped to the walkway he stopped suddenly. He saw Sarada's face, and smiled. It's okay. He placed a hand on her shoulder. If you are not ready. Sarada's mind snapped back into focus, and realized his hand was on her shoulder, and his bright eyes were looking into hers. She reached her hand up across her chest, and placed it on Naruto's hand. She smiled at him. Naruto's smile turned into a foxy smirk. I get it. It's not easy to express. Naruto of course was speaking of her daddy issues, and yet Sarada was far from thinking of that problem. Her fingers wrapped around Naruto's fingers, and she stepped closer to him. Naruto's smirk stayed, but he could feel something different in the moment. He could feel nervousness edging in, and a little bit of curiosity. Sarada, Naruto whispered. Sarada's eyes stayed fixed on his, and she made the final step to bring the both of them close enough that she could almost feel his body against her. She had no idea what he was going to do, but she had to do something. She took his hand from her shoulder, and brought his fingers to her lips, and lightly kissed his knuckles. Her eyes lowered to look at his skin. She was panicking on the inside. This moment could end horrifically. Naruto felt the warmth on her lips against his skin, and a surge of electricity tingled down his spine. He found himself stuck in a moment of uncertainty. This teen that was obviously attractive had his fingers to her lips. He felt something deep within him tempt him to respond to Sarada with a sensual physical gesture. Naruto thought about how Sarada's cheeks would turn pink around him. He thought about the way they've awkwardly caught each other's eyes after checking each other out. This is why you haven't come back to see me. Naruto was calm as he spoke. He tried to think about what he should have said. Were those the right words to say? Naruto was never good with mature topics and dealing with other people's emotions. Sarada merely nodded in response to his question. Naruto watched as Sarada's cheeks turned pink. She lowered both their hands and let go of her hold on his fingers. Both of them let their hands rest at their sides as they looked into each other's eyes. I am not sure what the two of us should do about this, you know. Naruto's voice was almost a whisper. He could almost feel their bodies touching, and he found himself wanting to feel her touch again. Neither do I, Hokage. Sarada's closed her eyes, and bit her lip trying so hard to stay in the moment. She just wanted him to know that no matter what happened here she wouldn't regret a second of it. Naruto raised his hand to her neck, and caressed the soft skin along her jawline with his thumb. He watched this young lady biting her lip torn between whether he should act on these feelings or not. He could see how much she wanted this moment in her eyes before she closed them. Sarada slightly turned her cheek to encourage Naruto that this was a good feeling. His thumb was now caressing her cheek. Naruto watched her face as he caressed her skin. He slowly moved his fingers down her neck. He brought his body close to hers. Their bodies are now touching. Sarada released her lip and opened her eyes, and a smile crept across her face. Naruto could see the pleasure in her smile and in her eyes. Her hands slowly found themselves moving to his sides. Naruto found himself getting caught up in the moment. The feeling of her body touching his, the look on her face, the feel of her encouraging him, and letting him know this is what she's wanted these past weeks. Naruto smirked a very fox-like, a cheeky smirk. No one knows we are here, you know. His voice filled with mischief. Sarada's fingers grasped at the orange and black fabric beneath her fingers. She had no idea what to expect next, but she knew it was not going to be rejected. No one, she whispered. Well, you have to stop calling me Hokage, Naruto said, as he removed his cloak and let it fall at their feet. Naruto, he instructed. But Sarada was caught off guard by the change in tone. Just when we are alone, he put his hands over hers and guides her fingers to pull his shirt up. Sarada followed his lead, and soon enough they both removed his shirt. His hands held hers, and he watched her face, as Sarada took a moment to look over the Hokage's torso. So, no more Hokage, just Naruto. Naruto smirked, waiting for her to look at his face, and when she did, she blushed again. Yes. She nodded at him. Naruto pulled her body close, and leaned in to kiss her. Sarada felt so nervous, but so excited at the same time. This was the moment she had been daydreaming about. He let his lips lightly brush against hers, and linger. Sarada parted her lips, and lifted her chin to kiss him back. Both their lips parted, and they stood kissing. Sarada found herself moving her hands up his bare torso. Naruto let out a groan against their kissing, which caused their kissing to become deeper. Naruto let his tongue brush her bottom lip, and then soon after their tongues were brushing against each other. Naruto felt his tummy burning with pleasure and lust. His body wanted more. He lightly bit her lip, and his hands found her hips. He slowly pulled her hips against his, and a muffled groan came from his lips once more. Sarada let out a noise of pleasure, feeling their bodies bump against one another. Sarada's hands now moved up Naruto's arms. Bed. Now. Naruto breathed lustfully, pulling his head up from their kissing. But Sarada found this escalating quickly. She gulped down the anxiety that tried to surface. Naruto got that fox-like smirk again. Bed. He grabbed her hand, and started to pull her towards the bedroom at the end of the hall. Sarada followed his motions, her heart pounding in her ear. Naruto's foxy smirk made Sarada even more excited. As they entered the room, Naruto sat at the foot of the bed, and Sarada found herself again staring at him. She was taking in the sight of him, the smell of him, and everything about Naruto. The light in the room was not on, and the blinds were drawn over the window. It was darker in the room, but she still had no trouble seeing the fire in Naruto's blue eyes, and feeling that her body was drawn to him. Naruto? Sarada spoke slowly. She was not used to calling him by his name. She wouldn't even call him Naruto away from his presence either. It was a simple form of respect and authority. She began to admit to him that she had never been intimate with anyone before this afternoon. Naruto shook his head at her words, and licked his lips. Sarada stepped closer once more. She didn't finish her sentence. Never mind that, Sarada. Naruto leaned forward, and grabbed her hands, and pulled her body to his, until Sarada stood between Naruto's legs. He guided her hands to rest on his shoulders. His hands made their way to her hips. His fingers crept under the hem of her shirt, stroking the skin beneath the fabric. She inhaled, and exhaled deeply. Sarada stared into his eyes. She couldn't stop looking into his blue eyes, wondering what was going to happen next. She could feel lust, pleasure, excitement, and control. Her hands stayed on his shoulders, but she found her body wanting to touch him more and more. She looked down from his eyes, and down at how her body was positioned. She was practically in his lap. She looked at Naruto's hands disappear under the fabric of her shirt, and slightly leaned her body toward Naruto to encourage him not to stop. Naruto moved his fingers out of her shirt, and eagerly moved his hands to the zipper of her shirt. He slowly unzipped her top, but Sarada grabbed his hands, and pushed them slowly down. Naruto felt irritation at this gesture, but it quickly subsided when he heard her shirt unzip. He looked up at her, and sure enough, she had unzipped her own top. Sarada let a red top fall to the ground to reveal that she wore a black low-cut under top, and a black plain bra underneath that. She felt a little more outgoing now that there was momentum to their situation. The awkwardness of it had started to fall away, and leave her in a state of pleasure. Sarada bent down, and placed her hands on his knees, and for a moment Naruto had a clear view of her chest, and how young, and curiously beautiful her body really turned out to be. He licked his bottom lip, eagerly begging Sarada to kiss her. Sarada smirked. Bed. That's what you said, right? She moved away from him only for Naruto to feel her body get on the bed. Naruto turned to her. He placed his hand on the bed, and crawled his way to her. Sarada leaned back so her head was on a pillow. Naruto stayed on all fours beside her, and he leaned down, and kissed her lips. He parted his lips without hesitation, insisting on adding depth to their kissing. He moved a hand to her stomach, and let his middle finger trace lightly the skin right along her hip bone. Sarada let out a noise of pleasure. Naruto's body shifted so that he was lying beside her with his body propped up by the arm and hand beneath him, while the other hand continued to move fingers along her skin. Now his fingers paused at the button to her shorts. His fingers were quick, and the button was undone. Naruto pulled out of the kiss and looked down at Sarada's body. He slowly pushed down her khaki shorts and leaned down to place kisses along the skin of her chest that barely peeked out of her tight-fitting black undershirt. Sarada lifted her hips and used her hands to help Naruto free her lower body from the shorts. As Sarada's hips' lower back touched the bed again, Naruto's lips moved to her ear, and he lightly bit her earlobe. His ring finger and middle finger slowly dipped into the fabric of her panties as his warm breath bathed her ear. Sarada nipped at her ear again. His pinky and index finger joined his other two fingers. Remember, he found the warmth between her legs, and his middle finger had no trouble instantly brushing her sweet spot. Sarada's panties already soaked in her body's excitement. "Call me Naruto," he growled lustfully into her ear. His experienced fingers quickly pleased her body. Sarada moaned uncontrollably at the touch of his fingers, his lustful voice, and his instruction. She moved her hips to match his fingers' movements. She had never been touched like this before, and never did she ever think it would be Naruto Uzumaki that would be doing it. She brought a hand to her face and pushed her glasses off her face. She let them fall to the carpet floor. Her hands grabbed at the blankets as the pleasure overwhelmed her. Naruto lifted his head so he could look down on her face. He watched her bite down on her lip, and her eyes closed tightly. He felt her hips pushing against his every touch, which encouraged him to move his fingers quicker and more forcefully. He could feel her body already wanting to tense, and he knew she was already close. He wondered if she knew that. He continued to watch her as he brought her closer and closer to orgasm. Sarada's stomach was tensing up, and within herself she could feel her body was so close to going over the edge. She released her lip from her teeth that had clamped down so hard on it. She tried to catch her breath. Her hands were still grasping at the blanket. Her hips are still encouraging Naruto to keep pleasing her. Sarada opened her eyes to find that Naruto had been watching her. They made eye contact, and right at that very moment she couldn't keep herself from letting go anymore. "Naruto," she moaned loudly, and her body jerked against his touch, and he knew he let her enjoy the complete ecstasy. His fingers continued as she wrote out the orgasm. Hearing his name come from her lips in that way was so rousing. He could not wait to hear it again. Days had passed since Naruto and Sarada shared the afternoon together. Sarada looked in the mirror and smiled at herself. She was not the kind of girl to give in to her own looks or be vain about her appearance at all. In fact, she never really thought she was any prettier than the young ladies around her, yet here she was looking at herself in the mirror and smiling. Whenever she found herself alone she couldn't help but think about Naruto's fit body so close to hers, her hands touching his body, and the exhilaration and pleasure he showed her that one afternoon. Naruto knew exactly what her body wanted. She could not help but think that of all the other people in the village, Naruto seemed drawn to her. She was not anything special, or so she thought. "Sarada, are you ready?" Sakura called from their living room area. "Let's go already." Sarada groaned as her thoughts rudely interrupted. She promised her mom she would spend the morning with her. It felt like a chore to be around her mom, even after growing up. Sarada, already irritated with her mom, left her room and met up with her mom. "Right. Let's go." Sarada walked out with her mom, and they set off on a morning that seemed to drag on and on. First, Sakura stopped at Ino's shop to replace the flowers they had at home in their dining area. Then, off to a little market shop to find a new pair of earrings. Sarada walked aimlessly at her mom's heel and engaged minimally in her mom's small talk. Most of her small talk was boring anyway. Sarada never really seemed to get that mom and daughter connection, but Sakura sure did try. "Would you like to stop and eat?" Sakura pointed at Ichiraku ramen. "I guess so," Sarada nodded. She was starting to feel hungry. They both entered the ramen house, which had expanded into a bigger building since the time Sakura was a kid. Sarada remembered hearing stories about all the destruction the village had been through as her mom grew up. Sarada and her mom both ordered the same ramen bowl and took their time eating. "Did you always believe in Naruto the Hokage?" Sarada asked her mom. She never really heard about how everyone felt about Naruto when he was younger. She just heard all the great things he did for the village. "Naruto?" She blushed. "No one took him seriously, Sarada." "Well, how come?" Sarada looked down at her ramen broth and swirled her chopsticks in the liquid. He was uncool, and an annoying Sakura looked out the window and smiled at the sunlight on her face. But he sure turned out to be one we all relied on and depended on a lot. Sarada looked up at her mom. She could tell in the tone of her mom's voice that her mom really had grown fond of the Hokage. "Annoying like Boruto? That's what you used to say, Boruto's just like his dad." Sarada made a face of misbelief. Sakura laughed and nodded as she turned her eyes back to Sarada. "Just like that, but louder." The two of them finished eating and left, waving to the owner and thanking him for yet another delicious meal. As they left, they continued their conversation with Sarada complaining endlessly about Boruto and telling her mom that there is no way the Hokage could be anything like Boruto. Sakura told her that if she didn't believe her she should ask others in the village. They both stopped by the park area and looked up at the Hokage's faces carved in the cliffside. But a lot has changed. Sakura sounded like she was lost in thought, admiring the view. A cheerful voice met Sarada's ears, and an arm rested over her shoulders, and Sarada looked over to see Naruto with both arms embracing Sarada and Sakura's shoulders. He had a very happy-go-lucky look on his face. Sakura glared at him. Sarada's heartbeat quickened, realizing she was so close to him again, but this time in public and in front of her mom. Sarada gulped down her nerves and nodded, looking back at the Hokage's faces. Sakura elbowed Naruto in the ribs and pulled herself out of Naruto's embrace. Naruto grabbed his ribs with his hand and let out a pain-filled MMMPH. Sarada blushed so hard as she looked at the Hokage in pain, but she didn't move. "Oh Sakura," Naruto laughed. He and Sarada looked each other in the eye, and Naruto winked at Sarada. Sarada didn't think she could blush any more than she already was. Sakura crossed her arms and made an irritated facial expression. Naruto lifted his arm from Sarada's shoulder. Sarada turned her back to her mom and continued to look into the Hokage's eye. She lightly bit her lip and let her teeth graze over her lip and made a smirk in his direction. Sakura, Shikamaru was standing off to the side, trying not to get mixed in with the nonsense Naruto made for himself. "Shikamaru," she smiled at him. "Well, we were just getting some fresh air, but we did intend on calling Sarada today. Good thing we found you guys here. It is such a drag having to go looking." Shikamaru stood in his usual lazy fashion, hands in his pockets. "Yep. We need a Team 7 member to go on a mission." Naruto couldn't help but stare at Sarada, but he knew he had to be careful how he looked, because while Sarada's back was to her mom's, Naruto's was not. Sakura could see his every expression. He stood up respectively. "It has been a while for her, hasn't it?" Sakura smiled at Shikamaru. "Let me know if there is anything I can do to help." Sakura looked at Naruto now. Sarada turned her head to her mom and Shikamaru. Shikamaru sighed in a lazy sort of way. "It isn't anything crazy." Naruto waved a hand at Sakura in a way that said, "Don't overreact." "Well then," Sakura waved to Sarada. "I will see you later, and you can tell me all about this mission." Sakura waved to the two men. Sarada waved bye to her mom, and then watched as her mom walked away. "Moms," Shikamaru walked up beside Sarada and sighed again. This time his sigh was that of annoyance. Sarada nodded at Shikamaru's understanding of the annoyances of mothers. Naruto didn't say anything. Sarada realized, of course, he never had his parents. She felt her heart slightly sink into her stomach. Naruto made a somewhat forced smile. "We got a special request from a couple Team 7 helped a while ago. They both seemed rather fond of you guys, but especially you, Sarada." Naruto explained. "Yeah. It was the couple that needed to send a message to their son who was out on some spiritual ritual, something soul-searching," Shikamaru added. "Oh yeah, the man was really a thief, and Konohamaru didn't have the heart to tell the parents at first, but I insisted we reunite them." Sarada nodded fondly of that mission. "I remember." "Yes." Shikamaru looked at Naruto. "Well, shall we take this back to the office?" "Oh, yeah." Naruto nodded. The three of them walked back to the office to discuss details and exchange intel. Sarada walked some steps behind Shikamaru and Naruto. She found herself back in the haze of Naruto's presence. She loved those whiskers on his cheeks, his blonde hair, the playful smiles he got when he was carefree. "You won't be going alone. I have found someone to keep you company. Thankfully also this should only take a day since they are in a neighboring village. They simply need you to be a witness at their son's wedding." Naruto handed Sarada the scroll that contained the invite. Wedding. Sarada was really caught off guard. "A drag, we know," Shikamaru chimed in. "But they are appreciative of you, and insist that you are the reason their son changed his ways. Don't tell me I will be stuck with someone lame for this mission." Naruto cleared his throat and raised an eyebrow. "Number 1 lame in all of the Hidden Leaf." Shikamaru let a smile creep across his face. Sarada almost fainted imagining herself at a wedding with Naruto. Alone with him, on a mission, at a wedding. Sarada could feel her cheeks starting to get warm thinking about alone time with Naruto. Special invite. Naruto held up another scroll. Sarada felt nervous, but hid it well. She looked at Shikamaru and said, "Are you also going?" "Our Hokage, silly as he is, can take care of himself, and anyone in this village if it comes down to it. I will just stay behind for this one." "So Sarada, 2 days from now we will meet. Try troublesome, these kinds of gatherings. I am happy to not go," Shikamaru said in a tone that, for Shikamaru, could pass as thankful. Sarada nodded and took her scroll from Naruto. All three of them said goodbye, and Sarada headed out of the office. Her mind was swimming with ideas of Naruto and her standing beside each other watching strangers saying, "I do," and people all dressed up. Sarada groaned thinking about what she would wear. She could not think of anything she owned that could pass as wedding kind of clothes. Sarada found herself thinking of Ino's shop and that little orange flower she had seen. She got home and briefly explained the mission to her mom. Finding this whole mission to be unbelievable, Sarada walked toward the entrance to the Hidden Leaf. She was supposed to meet the Hokage in a matter of minutes. She had meant to get there earlier, but she burned her breakfast and started over. By the time she realized what time it was, she had ended up eating and walking. Sarada looked around to see if the Hokage had made it over or not. A small smile crossed her face as she remembered that he was always late. She sighed and stepped just outside the village. She could not even imagine what to expect on this mission. It was considered a mission, and therefore Sarada knew she was representing the leaf. She tucked her hands in her pockets and kicked a rock on the ground. She thought about the idea of a wedding and what it would feel like to be a bride. Sarada never gave it much thought about weddings. She might have thought about boys and dating, but marrying them. The thought seemed scary to her. Oh. Phew. Naruto appeared looking and sounding relieved. Hokage. She smiled at him, and their eyes met. She felt her heart beating in her ears. Come here. Naruto looked over his shoulder to make sure there wasn't unwanted attention. He started walking toward the trees off the road. Sarada pulled her hands from her pockets and followed him. He was wearing his Hokage cloak, and he didn't want people noticing. She thought to herself. They walked past a couple trees, and Naruto turned to her with a smile. Sarada stopped just feet from him and waited for him to speak. I hate doing this to you. Naruto brought his fingers up to his chest and started to form a jutsu. Sarada watched his fingers and knew right away that it was the famous shadow clone jutsu. She watched as he spoke the words, and an exact copy of him appeared right beside him. It smiled automatically. The clone? Sarada wasn't sure about what was going on. Yes. He will accompany you throughout the mission. I am Hokage, you know. He winked. But Sarada looked at the clone, and then at the Hokage. She didn't want to question him, but she was not sure what the point was. Why? Sarada, Naruto let out a chuckle. He filled in the couple feet between them, and looked into her eyes. Sarada felt her body fighting to stay still. Her body wanted to be closer to him, touching him. I can't leave the clone here. Shikamaru would kill me. You never said anything about a clone when we discussed the mission. Sarada just stared at him. She put her hands in her pockets, and wrinkled her brow at him. The clone watched, and waited. I promise next time we can find time alone. It won't be a clone. He felt discouraged by the look on her face. He felt as though there was a mistrust in her eyes. He had tried so hard to be there for her in understanding her father. He had wanted her trust this whole time, and they developed something they could only share through trust. Sarada looked past the Hokage at the clone, and then back at the Hokage. Naruto lifted his hand behind his head, and scratched nervously. Sarada took her hands from her pocket, and walked to the clone. Well, let's go. She kept her back to the Hokage, and waited on the clone. You got it. The clone smiled pleased that Sarada walked over to him. Hey. Sarada. Naruto felt a twinge of hurt in his heart, as she walked past him with no words to say to him. Sarada turned to him. She tried her very best to look serious. Naruto wanted to tell her sorry or at least try to further explain, but looking at her serious face, gave him a chill in his spine. He could see the Sakura in her now, the Sakura that would get so angry and annoyed with Naruto. He shook his head and waved. There I go screwing up again. Naruto couldn't even force a smile. His clone walked on, and Sarada quickly followed. As she walked she wiped her eyes. Did I really just hurt the Hokage's feelings? An hour into the mission, Sarada wasn't even sure what to say or do around this clone of the Hokage. She understood the purpose of shadow clones, and never had issues being around them. Sarada just didn't think she would be alone with the Hokage clone for this mission. She expected the real Hokage. Of course, it would be like Shikamaru to insist that the real Naruto stay in the village. She caught the clone's eyes, and smiled. Clone or not, he still represented Naruto Uzumaki. Should we take a break? The clone offered to turn to a small boulder that seemed okay to sit on. He, of course, had the chakra of Naruto, so he was far from being tired. But what a break, Sarada said, as she tossed her backpack on the boulder, but she overshot the toss, and it slipped right off behind the boulder. The clone of the Hokage hopped right over, and quickly picked it up, and placed it on the boulder. He grabbed the water container from the side pocket, and walked it to Sarada. Thank you. She took the water from his hands, and the clone nudged his fingers forward just enough that her fingers touched his. She felt her cheeks get warm. The clone smiled widely at her, as her cheeks grew pink. Warming up to me, finally. He slid his fingers from hers. I don't know what you mean. Sarada lifted the water to her lips. She sensed the mischievous undertone in his comment. Ha. I suppose it would be weird to be around a clone. The Hokage's clone nervously scratched the back of his neck. But I'm still Naruto. Sarada found his nervousness cute. His whiskers seemed to adopt the same pinkish color that he would get if he was embarrassed. Sarada smiled. She wished it was the real Naruto here with her though. She remembered the look on his face before she left. Sarada meant to be rude, but not in a way that would hurt him. She just wanted to get the point across that she didn't like this plan at all. Ready to move on. The clone lowered his hand from his neck. He watched her and thought for a moment. We only have a couple hours if we are to arrive on time, you know. Of course. Sarada geared up, and they started walking again. I know a shortcut. The clone pointed through a bunch of trees and foliage that was off the path. Team 7 shortcut. The clone sounded nostalgic. Sarada smiled hearing that. Sarada, the clone looked over at the young woman. Sarada looked up at him, and she saw a spark in his blue eyes. Life. She bit her lip. Chakra flows through Naruto's chakra clone or not. I see that same spark in his eyes. Yes, Hokage. Sarada addressed him respectfully. You know the Hokage should stay in the village, right? The clone spoke, as though he wasn't talking about Naruto at all. But he doesn't always, does he? Her tone is pouty, but rude at the same time. You're right, but Shikamaru's job is to help advise and encourage the Hokage in the decision-making process. The clone stopped walking when he got to a tree that was surrounded by thick branches and plants. Okay, Sarada shrugged at his explanation. She looked up at the tree, and then around her at all the plants. The clone grabbed Sarada's hand and pulled her body close to his. He looked down into her eyes. The clone placed his hands on her shoulders, and he licked his bottom lip begging for a kiss. Sarada recalled standing in the Uzumaki home and seeing Naruto do that. She breathed in deeply and gulped down her uncertainty. She put her hands on his chest. The intention was not to hurt your feelings, Sarada the clone whispered, as he leaned in to kiss her lips. Sarada couldn't stop herself from giving in to the moment. She kissed him back, and both parted their lips. The moments passed, as they held onto each other, and kissed. Sarada's hands moved down his torso, and she tucked her index and middle fingers into the clone's front pockets. She pulled his hips to hers. The clone let out a pleasurable grunt at their hips touching. Hokage. Sarada pulled out of the kiss. Naruto. He corrected her with a wink and foxy smirk. Sarada instantly blushed. Call me Naruto, Sarada. Ha. Sarada lost her thought for a moment, as she got lost in the ecstasy of saying his name in the way she had that afternoon a week ago. We better get going, Sarada said, biting her lip. She hated having to let go of this moment, but a mission is a mission, and it needed to be completed. Oh, yeah. The clone chuckled. Right. He cleared his throat, and they both stepped back from each other. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.